So you're away at college, doing your thing, hanging out. I can imagine for a person who's sheltered, you're like, this is the life.
We were going out like maybe like 4 or 5 nights a week, and so we're with these older guys, and I remember him like keep asking me like, like, you don't want to drink, or just take a shot. And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to drink or whatever. He's like, just take a shot. So he's like, just take a sip, it's not going to do anything. So I remember like literally taking a sip of something, thinking, of course, nothing's going to happen. Like, okay, fine, I took a sip, leave me alone. And I remember, like, saying, okay, I have to go to the bathroom. And I walked what had to be maybe, like, the bathroom was maybe 20 steps away. And so I walked to the bathroom, and I don't remember using the bathroom, but I remember walking back out of the bathroom. And I can remember it like it's yesterday. And, the lights are spinning, and the club is dark. And I remember, like, collapsing, like, in the middle of the club, which was not that big, in comparison to where the bar and the bathroom was. And so I remember like these, bodyguards or, security, picking me up. And I remember them like, putting me in his car. But after that, I remember like absolutely nothing. So I remember waking up the next morning and I was just sore, like completely sore, naked, and I'm in his bed, which I had never been in his room before. And I was in his bed, and he came out the shower, and, he's butt naked, and like I just, I'm crying. And he gets up and he's like, you all right? And, and I just jumped up, put my clothes on, I'm crying, and I run down to my car. I remember like in that moment, like the guilt and the shame that kind of like tried to set in. I remember going back to school in the end of August, and I started having like really bad stomach cramps. So I came back and I went to the doctor, and I found out that I was pregnant. I had completely forgotten that I had gotten raped because I just
Put it out of your mind.
Put it out of my mind.
That's what trauma does.
Yeah. And so a friend of mine had invited me to go out to the club. I just knew that like he wasn't still gonna be there. So I went out, and he was still in his same standing VIP section. He ended up making his way down, and like came, like brushed by me and was like, where's my son?
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Talk with Koiya. I am your host, Koiya, and as you know, this podcast is brought to you by Talk, Test, Treat. If you are located in the Central Florida area and are looking for a place to go and get tested, visit www.talktestcfl.com. Today, I have a very special guest here with me today. She's no stranger to the show. She was on last season, and we brought her back for another season because she has a very impactful story to share. Help me introduce and welcome Natalya.
Thank you, girl. Thank you so much. It's always an honor to be a part of anything that you do. And so I continuously thank God, even in prayer, for your platform and, just for the opportunity that you give us all to speak out and, get better informed on our, personal health as well. So I'm excited to share. And I know there is no better one for this story than you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for trusting me to share this story because I know it's one that's near and dear to you. All right, girl. So we start every episode with the Talk with Koiya card game. So I'm going to have you pull a card, read it aloud, and then answer it.
Here goes nothing. Why is it uncommon to talk about HIV openly? Okay. So I think that maybe one of the reasons it's uncommon to talk about HIV openly is because people don't want to be judged. And there are still so many stigmas and misconceptions around the virus that people really just don't understand that, like we've talked about before, that it's not a death sentence. This person is not a mutant alien, and that you don't get infected just by knowing them, at this point,
Right.
And so I think that vaguely that is one of the reasons why it's just uncommon to have the conversation, because people they're ignorant.
You're absolutely right, and don't want to educate
Yep,
themselves.
yep.
All right, pick another one.
Okay. Why do you think HIV percentages are high within the Black and Brown communities? So I think this is also a good one, pertaining to even our topic for today, because there are also so many misconceptions, and with the current sexual fluidity of the culture, people are not protecting themselves. They're not accurately understanding even that basic graph that we used to get in school, where it's one girl figure and one guy figure, and they come together, and all of a sudden there's 7, 8 more on the bottom, which is how sexual diseases, viruses, bodies, are multiplying, because you may think that you're having sex with just me. And even now, even when you think about just the music that we listen to and the agenda that's being pushed, and how, even in our community, there are less marriages currently. And so if I'm in a relationship with you and we both have agreed that, hey, this is an open relationship, now we're opening ourselves up to many more infections and possibilities, because we just feel like, oh, we just sleep together. That's my thing. That's my little, what they call it?
My little boo.
That's my little boo. My little shit. Yeah, that's what they say now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, are you ready to hop into this episode? We've had you on the podcast last season, as I said, and that was a little bit more lighthearted. You were our first live show, which was so fun to have you. And now we're here to share a story that, like I said, is a little bit more impactful and one that's needed to be told. So let's hop straight into things. I want to know a little bit about your backstory first, though. Tell us about young Natalya growing up. What were things like for you? Were you sheltered? Were you exposed to a lot? How did that go?
I definitely was sheltered, because both my parents were West Indian from Jamaica. And my mom, I thank God now, for the type of person that she was. Both my parents are very open-minded. They were married in the early part of our lives, and then they divorced. So we were in single-parent households. My mom and dad had 3 kids together. My brother, rest in peace, and then my older sister, Renthia, and myself. But church was like my outlet growing up. And so it's a blessing even now to come full circle and to see how God was planting those seeds, for the rest of my life then. But my mom never really went to church like that. She didn't stop us from going, and she was really open-minded. So she, pushed a lot of like personal research on us and made us like, read into all of these things, which helped me to be able to have conversations with a little bit of everybody in life. But we did not get out much, other than church, which I thank God for that. And so it's just funny to see, how all of those things that we think were insignificant in our upbringing now are really like major parts in the story. So I'm excited to get into that.
So, if your mom didn't go to church, how did you end up in church? Like, what prompted you to be like,
So when my mom and dad separated, my mom took a couple months before our whole family moved down here, because my grandmother built a house in Orlando with my grandparents, and one of my aunts moved down with her daughter. She only had one child, and so my mom sent me and my older sister with my aunt and my grandma for a little bit. And so my aunt, just, looking for something deeper, a deeper connection in her life, she started going to a local church. And so she took us. And then, when her work schedule got a little bit more hectic as she was trying to financially establish her life, we started getting on the church van and, just going by ourselves. And so we were there about 3-4 days a week.
that's awesome. So, you kind of took initiative yourself to go. Because, like, most of us, as a person who went to church Monday through Sunday, choir rehearsal, prayer meeting, Bible study,
Yeah.
church on, like, I was there all the time. But it was not, I wouldn't say forced on me, but it was something that my family did. My grandma, forced on us. I can't say now. So it's interesting that it seems like you kind of took initiative to do this thing on your own. Your mom didn't force you.
She didn't force us. I definitely had a desire on my own, and maybe that's just a connection that God had with me personally, or that I made with Him. But it also makes me think about what happens to the church vans.
Yeah.
Like, they need to come pick these bad kids up.
Yeah, we need the church
Yeah.
fans again. Okay, so growing up West Indian and then also being in church a lot, what did you know about sex? What was your perception of sex? Like, did you ever get the talk? Like, what was that like?
So the church that I went to was a really amazing church. And so my team pastor, who is a monumental figure in my life, he, made sure that they had a lot of those conversations that they kind of prepared us, but the church also instilled like a fear in us. And we thought that, or it was told to us in some type of way, and I don't really want to put this on the church, but that's where I got it from, that the second we had sex, that the clouds were literally going to crack and God was going to come and we were just going straight to hell. And so, that instilled like a fear of God and of, sexual intercourse. And then I think once it started getting out, word around the water cooler, that this one had sex and that one had sex, and you realize God didn't come back yet, now you're like, well, wait a minute, it probably don't go like that. And so that happened. But then also, I think as a child as well, I always felt that I had like a spiritual connection with my father, with my dad. And so my dad, I always knew that sex was his vice. And so I remember like, little interactions that I probably like shouldn't remember. It was nothing dark, but just little things when him and my mom were separated, and he would come by like after he got off work late, and to drop off groceries randomly, and try to like maybe make advancements at my mom, and she was not having it. But the way that he desired it so much, I could feel the spirit on that. And in that, as a young child, I remember kind of just like, pretending to be asleep one day, and I hear him coming over to drop off some groceries. And there was something that came over me that I knew sex would be my vice. Like I knew, both of my parents, they smoked cigarettes, they drink alcohol. Cigarettes wasn't my thing. Alcohol wasn't my thing. So many other things weren't my thing. But I knew that sex and promiscuity, even long before I ever had sex, I knew that that was something that would like try to have a hold on me.
So, as a young girl, did you experience a lot of battles with promiscuity or with just like running to sex? When was sex introduced to you?
So I maybe in a sense was like a little bit unconventional. I remember, which is completely off topic, but I remember this lady that I used to like love in church, and this is my childhood remembrance of the story. And so I remember that she was like prominent in the church. Her husband, he did things in the church, and when I was a little girl, I believe that he had, like, the husband had an affair with someone. And so I remember that they said, for whatever, the husband had an affair with someone else in the church, that they had to leave the church. And so, well, her husband had to leave the church. And she, who was, also prominent in the church, decided that she was going to leave too. And I had to be maybe like 7 or 8. And I remember like how much I loved this lady and seeing her at church. And I felt like, oh my God, there's no way she's going to leave with her husband. Like, he cheated. He was having, sex with someone else in the church. And in that moment, it also ignited something in me that I felt like, I don't want to be the lady. I want to be the man, and I knew that that not as far as like, any change of gender, but secretly it was a change in my thought process. And I felt like even eventually, whenever I got to sex, that I would be the man. I wouldn't be the girl. I wouldn't be, the victim. I wouldn't be the one with less control. And so, those little thoughts that were building even as a child, and, that feeling that I had that, sex would be my thing. Even though I did have the love of God and fear of God, and so I stayed away from it from a long time. But when that door was open, there were so many secret thoughts that I didn't remember was still in there, that it was a whirlwind.
I know for a lot of us who were sheltered, or just grew up in a city where everybody knows everybody and everyone knows your family, it usually takes for us to go off to college to really do what we want to do in a sense. Would you say that was your story?
In a sense, but I believe it was senior year. I want to say it was my senior year that I had sex, and at that time, I was dating this boy in the church, and he found God, loved Jesus. I loved Jesus, and so we thought that there was no way we were not gonna be married. Maybe it's 11th grade year. We thought that 10th and 11th grade, anyways. So we thought that there was no way we were gonna not be married. And I think once that came into my mind and he had sex before and he started talking about it, then I had sex and, that relationship ended up working out for different reasons. He went off to college in efforts to create the life that we would live after high school. And then when he graduated early and left, I realized, like, I don't want to be with him. And it was really my mom, like my mom and my aunt too. They were like, "You're moving too fast. The whole world is out there. You don't know. Don't settle down with this one person or whatever." And so that was my introduction to sex. And then after he moved away to college, I, wasn't sexually active again until I left for college. And yeah.
Talk to me about when you left for college. What was that like?
When I left for college, I wasn't like wild at all, but there was a disconnect a little bit with some of what I feared or learned in church and then kind of getting out into the real world. And I also had like, I want to say like I would say maybe a troubled childhood compared to how other people would categorize it. But I thank God that I've been triumphant in it. And I do count it as part of just my testimonial story that God had to take me through. So I don't even like fault, I don't fault anyone or fault my mom for like, low key being, abusive, but it's funny that I can laugh about it now, but it's not her fault, honestly. She had an abusive childhood and, she, desired to be with this man and marry this man, and you thought that it was going to be all these things and just not knowing how to, put that aggression somewhere else when she ended up being a single parent. But through all of those things, I feel like I was searching for, I don't want to say, like, um, love, because I always knew that my dad loved me. And then I had my teen pastor that really showed me the love of a man. But I think that I'm a hopeless romantic, or I used to be a hopeless romantic. And in that, when I started dating someone 9 times out of 10, I thought like this was it, not knowing what it was. And so I think that kind of makes you feel like, okay, I can have sex, And up until that point, when I realized that the clouds weren't gonna crack, and God wasn't gonna come back right then and there, I think that almost tarnished my understanding of what really happens when you have sex and those soul ties and all the different transfers and things like that.
So you're away at college, doing your thing, hanging out. I can imagine for a person who's sheltered, you're like, this is the life. I don't got my mama and my aunties here telling me what I can and cannot do. You then decide to come back home one summer when you are 19. Walk us through what goes down that summer and what that summer was like for you.
So the summer after my freshman year, I came home just because, it was easy to make money, home. And, you don't have anybody paying for your dorm, to stay during the summer. So I came home for the summer. And that summer, a friend of mine that I was really close with was like going out, this was her city in a sense, she was a pretty girl and, she was around all the guys with money and stuff. And so I was staying with her for the summer and we were going out like maybe like 4 or 5 nights a week, and so we're with these older guys that pretty much like, I would say they had a residency at the clubs pretty much. I mean, they weren't getting paid to come. But literally they were, they had standing sections at any club you could think of in the city. And so, as a young kid, you're like, dang, like I'm around these people and we go out, we have a good time, and we're in, the spaces to be. At the time, I wasn't drinking or smoking or anything like that, but I was going out regularly. And so I remember, like, in particular, one time I went to like this mansion party, and it was like, one of the guys that, like, supposedly at the time had the most, and he was older, and
When you say had the most, like most money, like the
the most
status and
status.
the
Yeah, yeah. And so my friend was like, hey, he likes you, but don't talk to him or whatever, because my friend wants to talk to him. And so I'm thinking, first of all, this man is old, and I mean, like, way older than us. When you're 18 and someone's 36, 37, like, they're
yeah.
old. I know it's maybe not to these girls these days, but, whatever. So I'm already thinking, like, he's not my type. He's short. He's old. Like, I'm young, like, whatever. And so, I didn't think anything of it, but there was a younger guy in the crew. And I had actually, like, thought the younger guy was cute. And so I didn't realize that in that crew, they had a thing, maybe it was unspoken, or maybe it was just competition, where if somebody liked somebody, then, the other guys would just try to sleep with that person just because, to show you, like, oh, you think she likes you, or oh, you like her, it's nothing, like, oh, I can sleep with her or whatever. So I didn't know what was going on. Anyways, and so that was that. When she told me, hey, this guy likes you, I'm like, you know forget about it. And still, that summer we were going out, 4 or 5 times a night, a week. And so I'm seeing, like, the guy all the time, but, so, which created, like, some sense of, like, not a friendship, because we never really had any one-on-one interactions. But it was just like, like,
He was an
yeah,
acquaintance.
he was an acquaintance. Like, I knew him, and, I'd been to his house because that was a time when everyone would, like, pregame and,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so I was around. And one time my friend, still the summer, and my friend was going out of town with the guy out of the group that she was dating. And so the older guy, maybe we're all, I don't know if they had group chats back in the day, but however, everyone was like, hey, we're going to go to Martini Mondays or whatever. And they were going to have like a fight watch party or something at his house. And so I'm like, I'm around these people all the time. Everybody that was, in the group, guys and girls, like, I'm around all of them. So I felt like, okay, I'm so used to going out now. It's the summertime, having a blast. Like, let's just go. So I went. And I remember driving my car to his house, and, everyone's there and they're partying and stuff. And there was, like, a lot of drugs and stuff around, but I already knew that I didn't drink and do any drugs. So I'm kind of looking, but I really didn't know what anything was. And, everyone's watching the game, and the night goes on. And I remember, like, little by little, everyone starts, like, leaving as the game is, like, wrapping up. And so, it starts to dawn on me that, hey, they're not going, or that, they're not going to the after club, and this one's not going. But still, because I had, like, brought my clothes from work, I just assumed that I was going to be changing there with a whole bunch of girls that I'm used to being around, and a whole bunch of people. And then, we would all go. And so by the time, like, the last set of people said that they weren't going, I was just like, dang, like, I already told this guy I'm going to go. Like, I'm just going to go. Like, I'm safe. Like, I'm around him all the time. I'm safe. And so I remember, changing my clothes. We end up going to the club. And I remember, like, being in, like, this small club downtown, and, it's the lights, and the club is dark, and, but the club was kind of small. And I remember him, like, keep asking me, like, like, you don't want to drink, or, just take a shot. And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to drink or whatever. He's like, just take a shot, take a shot. So he's like, just take a sip. It's not going to do anything. So I remember, like, literally taking a sip of something, thinking, of course, nothing's going to happen. Like, okay, fine, I took a sip, leave me alone. And I remember, like, saying, okay, I have to go to the bathroom. And I walked what had to be maybe, like, the bathroom was maybe 20 steps away. And so I walked to the bathroom, and I don't remember using the bathroom, but I remember walking back out of the bathroom. And I can remember it like it's yesterday. And, the lights are spinning, and the club is dark. And I remember, like, collapsing, like, in the middle of the club, which was not that big, in comparison to where the bar and the bathroom was. And so I remember, like, these, bodyguards, or, security, picking me up. And I remember them, like, putting me in his car. But after that, I remember, like, absolutely nothing. Like, I don't, I don't remember anything. I don't remember if we went to IHOP or, straight to the house. I don't remember if we stopped at 7-Eleven. Like, I don't remember the car ride. I don't remember anything. And so I remember waking up the next morning, and I was just sore, like completely sore, naked, and I'm in his bed, which I had never been in his room before. And I was in his bed, and he came out the shower, and, he's butt naked, and, like, I just, I'm crying. And he gets up, and he's like, "You all right?" And, and I just jumped up, put my clothes on, I'm crying, and I run down to my car or whatever. And I remember, like, at the time, like, you remember that little pink Nokia phone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I
With the
had
gray
one.
buttons.
I had
Listen.
one.
So that was my phone. So I remember calling my friend who I lived with at the time, that was also around these, guys at the time. And I'm like, "Hey, like, this guy just raped me. Like, I need to go to, the hospital. I need to, make a police report." And I remember her telling me that, I didn't need to, like, I didn't need to, like, do any of that, because, like, if I'm saying that I think he raped me, that I could be wrong, like, that I could have consented to it. If I don't remember what happened last night, then I couldn't, I don't know. And so I remember, like, in that moment, like, the guilt and the shame that kind of, like, tried to set in. And I thought that, she was my friend, and she was a little bit older than me, and I trusted her. And so, and not to blame her now, because I still thank God for the way that my life has turned out. But I just remember, like, her telling me, like, and I didn't think that maybe her motivation was that she was still going to have to be around these guys after I left to go back to school in Atlanta for the summer, and that she maybe she didn't want to be the best friend of the girl that said that this guy raped her, or, was raising a big stink. And yeah.
So you wake up the next morning. When you say you're sore, obviously at this point you've had sex before, so you know what it feels like the next morning after you had sex. So was the soreness more of like, was it like my legs were sore from falling, or was it like you were sore like, hey, I had sex last night against my will sore?
It was for sure like a sore, like a, for lack of a better word, I want to say, I felt like just sexually exhausted, And so even, like, even preparing myself for this, conversation, and I know, like, God had put it on my heart that it's just time to share. Even in that, I've had so many thoughts, and, which kind of hit me all over like a ton of bricks. Like, that soreness, like, could it have been that it was more than one person? You know what I'm saying? Could it? I don't know. Like, I don't know. So,
But when you wake up the next morning, I know you obviously speak about the guilt and shame that began to settle in. Did you ask him, hey, did we have sex? Oh my God, what happened last night? How did I get here? Nothing.
no, I literally just got up, put my clothes on, ran out of there, because we weren't friends, and I hadn't had any one-on-one conversations with him before, like, like a conversation, not like, how, hello, do you want a drink, or, hey, or she's with us, not like that, but like a real conversation. So I think in that panic, like, I know that at no point was this my intention. I'm not even attracted to you. This is not something that I wanted. There was no gain there for me. Like, I mean, so I just didn't even think about having a conversation.
Yeah. And of course, you were so young that you probably didn't even have the tools to have that conversation.
Right.
And like you said, once the guilt and shame begin to settle in, it's like, let me get out of here. You say you remember that feeling even now vividly. Have you ever felt a soreness like that before after sex?
No.
Okay. So that in itself tells you that, one, it was against your will, and two, it could have possibly been multiple people.
Right. And then I also, which I don't honestly believe that it was, but I don't know, But at the end of the day, I feel like even as an adult, like, as I grew in life, I feel like I also had a, now that I'm thinking about it, I've always had like this point in sex that I was never, even in a relationship, willing to go past, you know? And even in times where I felt like it may have been too much, I'm just like, my body just shuts down, you know? And so, I don't even now, I mean, I feel like maybe that is a correlation, even subconsciously,
Of course.
just to not get to the point of pain. And so, yeah, but so then after that, so then after my friend, told me that I didn't need to go to the, hospital, I didn't need to press charges, that, I just had a couple more weeks left until I went back to school. So at the time, like, when we were growing up, and maybe not growing up, because it was just kind of like maybe after high school, that was a time where it was all about like, getting money, and like getting money from guys and things like that. And so at the time, because I didn't grow up that way, I didn't know like how to like ask guys for money, or I just felt like my mom was a go-getter. I never seen her asking even my dad, who had 3 kids and really technically owed her money. I never seen her make a big stink about that. So that wasn't initially like my MO. And so my friend was like, hey, well, if you feel like this or whatever, like, let's get some money out of him. And she was like more aggressive, with guys or whatever. And I'm like, like, I was just disgusted. I was sick. I'm like, just the thought of him gave me like anxiety. And so I didn't go out the rest of that summer. And she would like use my phone and call or text him and like, get money from him. And then like I would be in the car, and, she would go upstairs, get the money, or he'd bring the money out. Literally no interaction between him and I. And like me and her, and I would split the money, or like she would give me some of them. I don't even know if she got more money than me, I don't even know. But I just was, it was just crazy. But I think that in my mind, or maybe in her mind, I don't know, it was some type of like, and there is no compensation, for taking advantage of someone or misusing someone. But I don't know what the motivation for that was. So I ended up going back to school the end of August, and I used to have like really bad like stomach problems as a kid. Just had a weak stomach. And so, and I don't know if that comes from being premature or what, but so anyways, I remember going back to school in the end of August, and I started having like really bad stomach cramps. And so I told my grandma, like, I called home and I'm like, Grandma, like, my stomach is hurting like really bad. I need to go to the doctor. And she's like, well, why don't you just come home like over the weekend and, go to the doctor down here, because, all of your insurance and, benefits are here. So I came back and I went to the doctor, and I found out that I was pregnant.
Wow.
Girl. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay. Go to the doctor, find out you're pregnant. What's the next steps? Like,
I don't know why, maybe it was God's will, but I don't know why I never had the thought of having an abortion. But I think also it was because I I didn't think that it could possibly be as a result of me getting raped, because I think that I had erased that situation from my mind, that I forgot that it ever even happened. And so prior to that, in the summer, I had had sex with 2 other people. One was like, my high school sweetheart, I guess you would say. And in that, that was a person at the time that I, really cared about, thought that, this is who my life future would be with, or, maybe it would just come full circle one day. And then also I had like a high school, middle school friend that I was just cool with. We really had no romantic relationship. I think maybe like over the summer at some point, we were just like chilling and playing video games, listening to music. And, we ended up having sex. It was really weird, like, oh my God, dang, what did we do? And so even after that, we kind of like had like a friendship a little bit still, but I think it tainted it, because it just shouldn't have happened. But in my mind, worst case scenario, I had completely forgotten that I had gotten raped, because I just
put it out of your
put
mind.
it out of my mind.
That's what trauma does.
Yeah. And so I didn't think about having the abortion because I felt like, hey, maybe it was this guy that I loved, or it was like a friend. And so I felt like, God forbid, if it was one of them, at least I could have a baby that was from a friend, and then maybe we could be, raise a baby off of a friendship. It was an 18, 19-year-old mind.
You're
Like,
young.
yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But, yeah, so that was that. I went through my pregnancy. I stayed home. I worked. And I did not think for a second that this is the way that it was going to be.
So, is there a point where you do a paternity test to find out that it is not potentially the two other people that you had sex with?
Yeah, so I did end up doing a paternity test with, my high school love. And it wasn't him, which was devastating, for both of us and
How
even
did
for the
he feel?
friendship. Yeah, that was like, it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. And it did affect our friendship, because I think that, and I had told him that at the time, because originally what happened was I wasn't planning on doing a paternity test with anyone, because when I ended up having my son, my family went through a lot of loss right before that. My uncle, whose birthday was 2 days before mine, he was 18 years older than me, but we were very close. He ended up getting killed in Boston. And then 9 days later, my little brother, my mom's, and my mom and my father's son ended up getting killed. And that was 2 weeks before I had my son.
Wow.
So, I mean, my family was in shambles. And so when I had my son, everyone, like my whole family, put all of their love into him. And so I just felt like, and I think it comes from also like growing up off of them Lifetime movies. And, you see people that like maybe have a baby or get raped or, anything, and they just live this fantasy life and they go on and there's no dad and they're fine and the baby's good. And so I thought that like that could be my reality. Like I didn't need a dad, like, no big thing. And so after that, like reality kind of set in, and I ended up having a paternity test with my high school love. And when it wasn't him, we were devastated. And so then I knew that the only other person it could have been was my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a test with him.
And it was not him.
It was not him.
So is that the point where reality sets in and it's like, oh, okay, so me getting assaulted by this person is now led to my child being here in this world?
Yep. And then I think even I try to like count it all joy, so even in that, I still felt like, maybe God allowed me to go through these things because, we spend so much time as like kids, like in our generation, watching the Mari and Ricky Lake back in the day, things like that. And, you see all these people with these paternity stories and you're like, oh my gosh, she's a slut, and, just passing judgment on people. And so, I do believe that God allowed me also to go through such a similar situation to be able to understand how the unthinkable can easily happen. Like who hasn't had sex with somebody, not in a relationship, and you have sex with someone that you care about, and then you end up having sex with a friend, or, like, I mean, a lot of people haven't because everybody doesn't live like that, but a lot of people have, and so even in that, like, it just made it, even to be in like some type of crazy triangle, but then for it to turn into like this crazy circle, of like, I mean, and literally a circle because it was just revolving. My head literally was spinning, for years, just at the thought that this is what it was. But yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you have your son.
Mm-hmm.
He comes into this world.
Looking just like me.
Yes, he does. I've even now to this day looks exactly like you. So you are considered to be a young mom at that point. And at that time, going out is something that young people do. You know what I mean? Like now we've evolved to the dinners and experiences
and
church and fun things. But at that point in life, like going to the club and hanging out was pretty much all there was to do. So is there ever any point after having your son that you want to go back to being a young adult and doing what young adults do?
Yeah, so Um, I guess, like I said, with the whole Lifetime spiel and watching these movies and thinking you can move away to this, place. Originally, I'm from Boston. And so I decided to move to Boston after I had my son just to get away and not have to deal with the realities of whatever had happened here. And I moved to Boston. That didn't work out. The snow wasn't for me. My older sister was living in New York at the time with her husband. So then I moved to New York. This is all like in a year span of me still living in the delusional reality that I could just make this life, Um, and I moved to New York. That didn't work out. Before I ended up moving back here, it was right before my son turned 1. And my mom was like, hey, go down, get a place, get a car, and then, come back and get him. Like, I'll keep him for a little bit. And so I remember I came down here, and I'm a go-getter, thank God. And so literally maybe in like 2-3 weeks, I got a place, I got a car, I was working. And so my son's birthday was coming up, and I, had planned to go up there and get him to bring him back down for his birthday. He was probably with my mom and my sister's mom for about maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And um a friend of mine had invited me to go out to the club, one of the same clubs that this guy lived at, might as well be.
Sounds like he lived at all of them, but
Right. And I just knew that like he wasn't still gonna be there, So I'm just thinking, okay, she begged me to go out. I'm like, hey, whatever, I'm gonna go out. So I went out, and he was still in his same standing VIP section. I mean, has had for years.
wow.
And so normally, you go, and if you ain't gonna be in VIP, you're not going, But this time, I'm like, I'm not going to VIP because I just didn't want to be in close proximity. I really had wanted to leave at that time, but I didn't drive, and so, he ended up making his way down, and like came like brushed by me and was like, where's my son? And I think like in that moment, my whole world like just shattered. Like it shattered because I just knew that there was no scenario in my mind that I would ever have to have a conversation with this man ever again in my life. And it just didn't work out that way. So my friend who was with me at the club that night, she was older than me. And not the same friend.
Okay, I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, she was older than me, and she had ended up talking to him after the club, and I didn't know, but she had set up a meeting for us to meet at like, I don't remember if it was like Wing House or something like that, like the next week after I had went and got my son. And so she called me and was like, hey girl, we're gonna go to Wing House, we're gonna go eat. And I'm like, okay, let's go eat. So we go there, and I mean, in that moment I felt like betrayed, but I know that that was not her intention. I know that she was just trying to
Bridge the gap.
facilitate, yeah. And so, no hard feelings to her. I get the motivation. And also probably seeing me like a young, struggling, teen parent pretty much, And so, um, I went and sat with him. He had a couple of like his guy friends there, which I thought was very like immature for you to be this big grown man. And so he ended up like taking off my son's sock, and he was like, "Oh, this is my son because all of my kids have my feet." And I'm like, okay. But it did, confirm a thought in my mind because I'm like, my son has always had these ugly little feet.
And they didn't come from me.
I know, not my feet. Like, but honestly, I thank God. Like, I thank God even today, on the way here to this conversation, I just listened to some gospel music and some Miles Monroe in the car. And I thank God for the joy of the Lord. And I cannot not say that because even now, like, I cried so much, and to be able to like laugh and, have joy, I know that's nothing but God. And so I thank God for that. But yeah, so anyways, yeah, he said, oh, this is my son. All my kids have my feet. And, then he said that he was going to help me take care of my son. And so even though I knew that I did not want my son to grow up to be anything like this man, and, I didn't want to even have him be a part of my life, I still just in that moment, I'm like, okay, well, I could use some financial help. And so I think that day he must have given me like $1,200 or something. And that was that. literally, I think we exchanged numbers, and he used to call me sometimes, like random times throughout the day, sometimes like late at night. He was in a relationship, and I was in a relationship as well at the time, had just gotten into a relationship. And and I'm telling him, like, hey, like, if you are gonna attempt to like be in my son's life, you need to let your girlfriend know that you have or potentially have a baby. We need to facilitate some type of paternity, responsibility, things like that. And he just kept sneaking around. And so I realized that based off of the little interaction and conversation we were having, which we had never had before, that he wanted to sleep with me. And so in that, I immediately shut it down, because I just could not even attempt to open that door, relive the trauma. I couldn't accept the fact that I would remotely be your baby's mom, especially with this. I don't know if it's a stigma or this misconception that happens. I don't know if it's in the Black community or if it's in other communities, where when you are someone's baby's mother, it's like a right for them to have sex with you for the rest of your life. Yeah.
And in a sense have ownership and agency over you.
Right.
Because of this, I'm tied to you for the next 18 years,
Right.
so we might as well kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
And good for you for putting your foot down and being like, no.
Yeah.
One, I never asked for it to begin with.
Right.
And you think just because of guilt and shame, I'm going to submit to
Right.
this conversation and entertaining you to thinking you can have me sexually?
Right.
No. So good for you. When he started reaching back out, and him wanting only a sexual relationship, because obviously at the dinner meeting he's telling you, oh, I'm going to help you with my son, this, that, and the other. Was there ever an attempt to ask about your son, ever any attempt to say, hey, does he need anything, or were there only sexual advances thrown at you?
After the first conversation, that first interaction at the restaurant where he had given me maybe like the $1,200 or whatever it was. After that, no, he wasn't really asking me. There wasn't many interactions, but the first couple times he called, maybe about 4 or 5 phone calls before I just deaded it. He wasn't really asking about my son. It was really just sexual advancements. And yeah, so I remember one day I was at work, and his girlfriend at the time, she called me and she was like, hey, this is such and such. And I know you are like trying to like put this baby on him, but he doesn't care about you or this baby. And, I think she said she was pregnant at the time, or she had just had a baby, one of the two. And so, that I was already at the point where I'm just kind of like, I'm not even about to entertain this, on top of the fact that I did not think that this was a good person, like the guy was a good person. And so I knew that like my son was overly loved by my family and by my dad and things. And so I just was hoping that there would be no remnants of who else he could have been. And so that didn't, blossom into anything. And then one day he called me and he was like, oh, hey, which I didn't really thinking about it, did not even understand the reason for the call. But he's like, hey, I'm going to Turks and Caicos or whatever. So go pull up at Men's Closet, which was like this, clothing store in Orlando. Go pull up over there and my friend is going to give you some money. And so I remember I went there and his friend came out, and I don't know if his friend kept the rest of the money. I don't know what happened, but his friend gave me $100 bill, girl.
What?
And I gave the $100 bill back to his friend, and I called him and I told him, listen, I don't care if I'm 19, I don't care if I'm 20, I don't care if y'all are 50 years older than me. I don't have gas, and gas was cheap then, but I don't have gas to waste coming somewhere to pick up $100. Because it's an insult, and I feel like you're trying to insult me in front of your friend. You know what I'm saying? Because like we didn't need diaper money. You know what I'm saying? We needed you to either try to be a better person and be a dad or not. And so that really like was the icing on the cake for my wake up call, and I was just like, no.
Has your son ever asked about his dad or who his dad was? Like, has there ever been a thought? Because, kids go to school. Sometimes they see two-parent households. It probably becomes the norm being raised by your mom, so you don't think anything of it. But like I said, once you go to school and you start getting friends, it's like, wait, so-and-so got a daddy. where's mine? Was there any?
That's exactly what it was. I think my son had to be like maybe 4 or 5. I think he was about 4, and he, asked me one day when I picked him up from daycare, like, Mommy, how come everybody else's daddy picks them up from daycare and my daddy doesn't? And at that time, I really didn't have an answer for him. But my dad at the time, was stepping up, and he kind of like turned it up a little bit and started, getting off work earlier to pick my son up and things like that. But also, and I think that also was around the time that my dad had got arrested, and so I think it was kind of, maybe that's why my son had that, you know, revelation that, hey, who's picking me up? Because I think at that time it probably was just me. And then I want to say maybe like a year or so later, he asked me about his dad again, and then he was like, "Oh no, Mom, my dad got abducted by an alien battleship."
Oh my gosh.
Girl. And I went with that story. Like, I'm like, yes, yes, he did.
I mean,
Yeah, and that carried us for probably, like, he's 16 now. So that carried us for, and I don't even think it carried us that long, because when he was 6, like maybe 6 turning 7, I ended up getting in a relationship. And so I'm still in that relationship now. We're engaged. It's been about, almost 10 years we've been together. Time flies. It feels like yesterday. But so with that, my fiance, who I have 2 kids with now, has accepted my son from day one. I love his kids just like they're my own too, but he accepted my son from day one as his own, and my son accepts him as his dad. They have a great relationship, and so I believe that he doesn't have a void. But when God like placed it on my heart a couple months ago, the time was coming for me to be able to share my testimony and speak about what I had been through. I remember it hit me like a ton of bricks, because for so many years I had put off the conversation with my son of the actual truth to the story, just because I thought maybe he wasn't ready for it, or things like that. And so which that also, there was a lot of reluctance in that, because you hear stories all the time about women or parents that don't tell their child that they were adopted, or just different things, because they don't think the kid can handle it, and in that the child ends up sometimes resenting the parents. And so when God told me that, hey, the time is coming and you're going to have to share your testimony, I immediately ran upstairs. I woke my son up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, I have to tell you something, because I would hate for you to like see it on social media or hear about it, through the grapevine. And so, he's a very blessed, amazing, mature. I mean, super mature. He's got a mustache. He's always had it, but he's a really mature kid. And so he handled it really well, and he was supportive. And I told him, that I know it was the middle of the night. And so, if he ever has any other questions or concerns, or, answers at any point in life, he can come to me, and I'll help him work through it.
that's beautiful. And allowing him the opportunity to know, because like you're saying, kids nowadays, they have social media.
Yeah.
This is obviously a public platform that this
Yeah.
is going to be placed on. So one day he will or have to see the story. And it's great that you got ahead of that and had that conversation with him. I want to go back to the friend, though. The friend that was with you and that you called after it happened. Do you think this person just didn't have the proper communication tools to be the friend that you needed in that moment? Because I'm sure now in hindsight, you look back and you're like, dang, girl, you was not the friend that I needed you to be in that moment. Do you think it was a situation where you guys were just young and she didn't quite understand what was going on? Or do you think it was solely just selfish behavior, like, girl, I got to be around them when you gone, so we going to brush this under the rug and keep it moving?
Honestly, to be honest, I feel like it was more selfish, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it was more selfish behavior, self-serving, that she is going to have to be around these people, and, she didn't want to maybe stand up for me because she's fine with them, and yeah, and I mean, maybe it could have been a little bit that, no, I want to give her the benefit of the doubt because I'm always giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. But
That's fair. Your truth is your truth. At the end of the day, it's your experience as well, you know, and you've already had to deal with the brunt of it. So it's like, why continue to protect someone, especially in a situation where they didn't even try to protect you or fight for you?
yeah, and it's crazy too because years later we had ended up, rekindling in a sense, and she apologized in a sense, for what she did, and she also shared that she was date raped by the guy.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I don't know the validity to that, but I don't know if she said that because she knows that that's what happened to me, or I don't know if it really happened to her. I pray that, either way, I pray that it's not what happened to her, but, it has been said wildly that he, has date raped lots of other people.
So this is something that you've heard that he's done to multiple people. This isn't just like a one.
No.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then to know that it happened to her too, allegedly.
Yeah.
Wow, that is just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So have you had to see this person again in recent years, or even just after the time of not being around or seeing him for a long time? Has there ever been a time where you've run into him again?
Yeah, from time to time. Now, thank God I'm not in the club no more because he's still there.
No way.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I'm not in the club anymore, but I remember it had to be like maybe like one of my cousin's birthdays or something. This is a couple years ago. So this incident that I'm thinking about was maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. I had ended up going out, and I saw him downtown, and I was coming out of the club, and I remember like saying, and I was down there having a good time. I probably had a few drinks, but for whatever reason, I just said, I'm going to pray for you. And he said, don't pray for me. He said, F that. I don't need you to pray for me. God never did nothing for me. That's what he said. He said, God never did nothing for me. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is like the spawn of Chucky, Satan, somebody. And so that was the end of that, brief interaction. Other than that, a few times I've seen him in passing. My son and I have seen him in the mall. And I remember one time, like, he was just, like, staring at my son. And so my son had asked me, like, Mom, like, who's that guy? Why he's staring at me? Or whatever. And my son was younger, and he was like, why is he staring at me? And I was like, oh, that's nobody. And we kept moving. But when my son was much younger, I used to have, like, really bad anxiety attacks or panic attacks whenever I would even just the thought of the guy. And so that happened maybe about, I want to say maybe like 1.5, 2, all the way to like 3. And I remember like just praying about it and like asking God to take, these attacks away from me. And so one day I woke up and it was gone. And, I could talk about him if I need to, which I never really do at all. But I could have talked about him. Someone could have brought his name up in conversation, things like that. And yeah, and I was fine. But I think one thing that did like convict me last year, my son had a football game, and I was at the football game, and this guy was there, and he kept looking at me, and the guy looked exactly like him, like exactly like the other guy. And so I froze up immediately. And mind you, I haven't had a panic attack in about 13 years,
Wow.
And I had a panic attack, and I'm sitting there and I'm hyperventilating, and I'm sure this guy, I don't even know if he knew what was going on. And it lasted for maybe like a minute or two. And then finally, when I was able to come down, even though my brain had accepted the fact that this was not the guy, I could not control the emotion or the anxiety. And so that convicted me, like that I just needed to spiritually tighten up and, just realign, because it's something that God had delivered me from. And, I've been good all these years, and it happened, not to say it's like that for everybody, but for me, it was a time that when I really looked at it, I was spiritually like, I was out of line a little bit.
You weren't walking with God as tight as you are now.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you think if you were to see him now in present day that he would still have that same effect on you?
Mm-mm.
So you think you've done the work to work through that, and you're walking so close with God now that it's like He won't even phase
Yeah,
you.
like now I am not offended at all. Like I don't operate in the spirit of offense. I don't have
Wow.
fear about it. Literally, if I was like a waitress at a place and he came to have dinner, I could take his order like,
Yeah.
"How you doing today, sir?" Like,
Mhm.
like literally I just have that peace about it now.
The
Yeah.
present day version of you, is there any desire to have a conversation with him at all, being that your child is, 16, still a child? Is there any desire to have any kind of conversation with him? None of it?
No, I don't have a desire to have a conversation at all because I know that he's not a good person, and I can see that it's not for me to judge, but from little interactions and things that I've seen over the years, even third party things, he seems to still be the same person. And
Mm.
so I don't feel like there would be any accountability there. I don't know if this is a Diddy situation, not even trying to call his name, but we look at Diddy, who has, done all these things allegedly to these women, a lot of that I believe that he's probably done, and he takes no accountability for that. And so this guy, even though he's not a Diddy, he was a Diddy to my city, in a
Mm.
sense. And so, even in that, and I'm not offended by it, but it did cause me over the years to also like sever ties with people that I did have love for. Even friendships, because I realized, like, if ever there was a time that someone by some chance knew my story, or that I shared my story with them, and just that lack of like empathy, to still be around this person, whether it's because they wanted drugs and he was, the guy to give them stuff, or, like, it just made me not judge them, but look at them a little bit differently. Like, you don't really stand for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. What perspective can you provide to women who think having a child by way of sexual assault is one of the worst things that can happen? Because although it was something that was unfortunate that had to you happen to you, you were able to find the joy and the silver lining in it. And you've said multiple times throughout this episode that it, ended up being a blessing. Your son is a blessing, and you love him so much. So for the people who subscribe to that, what perspective can you offer them?
Yeah, I think that ultimately God is the giver of life. And, there has been times in my life I'm not like, I'm not a saint, and so I have made the wrong decision and I have aborted life. And so I thank God that I didn't abort my son's life, and that he's a testament to how, triumphant God is even in these situations, and everything. But that's really, that topic is really what God had put on my heart. It was kind of around the election time, I think, when we first spoke about it. And just because, like, part of the narrative, I'm not a major Trump supporter or a Kamala. I'm just me, Team Jesus, baby.
Right. Hello.
Right. But I remember, part of Kamala's whole campaign was that, women need to be able to have abortions, even late term abortions, because if not, and they had like some major commercials around it, if not, they will be forced to have their attacker's baby. And so, my thought on that is that in all things, God is completely and utterly divine. And, I just thank God for his forgiveness in the times that I didn't make the right decision. But I hope that, my story can encourage someone, just to trust God in all situations, because he definitely is the light of the world and the light at the end of the tunnel. And I did not, foresee my situation turning out like this. Like, my son, I have other kids now and I love them all equally. But, my son was the first, like, my first true love, my first example of love. We went through so much together, and I thank God for the ability to be there for him as he grows and evolves. But he really was there for me in a lot of my growing and evolving. And I'm still growing and evolving. And just to see him as a kid sometimes, and he comes in and, after football practice or track practice, and he's so stink. And he's just jumping all over me or picking me up. I mean, literally holding me in the air. And it's just like, I thank God for those moments on those days. And even, our relationship and the love that we have in our bond now, it also makes me constantly think about the children that I have aborted, and their destinies. And, and I pray that, maybe God repurposes. I don't know how that works, but I thank God that I didn't abort him, and I hope that this testimony and story can encourage someone else, and maybe someone that's going through maybe right now that doesn't know what to do or what to decide, or they feel like a victim. In all things, God gives us the ability to be victorious, and so I hope that they allow God to let them be victorious in this situation.
I love that. As you mentioned, one, you and I have known each other for years, and it wasn't until a few months ago where you called me and said that you wanted to share your story that I found out about. I've known Skylar for since he probably was 6 in the
Yeah.
last 10 years. Um, and there's never any conversation surrounding who his dad was, not in a way of like me not caring. It was just like, I don't get in my friend's business
Yeah.
in that way. And unfortunately, I do know that a lot of Black women have to step up to the plate and be a single mom for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that he never had a lack. So there was never a need to have a conversation about his father. But you did reach out to me and you wanted to have this conversation. So do you think God has called you to be a voice for other victims through your experience?
I do believe so. I do believe that, you know, maybe the biggest thing is also a lot of times it it can be for any reason, that women and maybe a lot of them are not even ever promiscuous, but for whatever reason, God has created us all for these tests, so that we can testify, and the word of our testimony is what sets us free and able to help someone else. And so, as I pay it forward, now in the time that God has called me to with my story, hopefully that empowers someone else to do the next, because they can reach someone that I won't be able to reach, and vice versa. And so, I do believe that God is using me, now, and this is part of my story. And I mean, we can go on and on for days, but at this point, I feel like this is what he has for me to release.
And I think this was the perfect time. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What other time to tell your story than now? I think this is going to be so impactful. I think you may lead other people who look up to you, who follow you, maybe someone who doesn't even know you who sees this episode, that now they find strength in finding their voice to tell their story about what has happened to them. Because as you have gone for so many years not telling your story, imagine how many other women out there who have been sitting on similar stories just like yours that now can feel empowered to live in their truth and tell theirs. So this is a perfect segue into our next segment, which is Give Them Their Flowers. And I want to give you your flowers physically.
Thank you so much, Koiya.
But yeah, I just want to give you your flowers for being a powerful, resilient, and tenacious mother, woman of God, sister in Christ. I want you to know that God has had a hand on you the entire time throughout your life, as I know you know. I admire your ability to give him all the praise and glory, even through your turmoil and hardship. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for making yourself vulnerable enough to share your story. And I just can't wait to see what God does from here on out, because I truly believe that you telling this story is the birth of what the advocacy for Natalya is going to look like in this realm of life. So I'm excited to see what he does with you next.
Thank you so much, Koiya. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for you. If there's one more thing that I want to say, it's that I don't know if it came from a song or from my church growing up, but I believe the song, if it is a song, says that the thing that you want to hide is the thing that he wants to use. If you would testify, that thing he will remove. And so I thank God for that. That has been like one of the secret mantras of my life. And so I didn't know when the time, to testify would come, but I know that we are redeemed by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. And so I am so grateful to have walked with you on the other side of the tracks, because we was in a club.
Hello.
Okay, we was all friends in the club.
Yes.
But now to be on this side of the track, like truly trailblazing for Christ, I mean, it's a blessing. And so thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for truly being a safe space.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I love you, girl.
I love you.